In a dystopian 1990s America, where robots roam war-torn cities, a teenager named Michelle embarks on a dangerous journey to reunite with her long-lost genius brother who is being used to power an AI plant. Accompanied by a mysterious robot and a drifter, they journey through isolated terrains to uncover dark secrets that challenge the very basis of human-robot coexistence. This is the recap of the movie, The Electric State, a 2025 sci-fi adventure movie. Enjoy the story. The movie begins in the year 1990, where Christopher, a young prodigy, shocks his teachers by completing a test in few hours, one that reportedly took Einstein 3 days to complete. As they leave the school, his older sister, Michelle, suggests he could attend college early, but Christopher remains uncertain about his future. Moments later, a soldier notices Christopher's t-shirt with a drawing of Cosmo, a cartoon robot on it, and he sternly warns Christopher about the looming war, as tensions between humans and robots are escalating. Cosmo is the main character of a beloved animated series, but as anti-robot sentiment begins to spread, the show is abruptly cancelled. We are told that the origins of the robot workforce dates back to 1955, when Walt Disney first designed them for theme parks. Over time, mass production turned them into the backbone of global industry. For years, the robots served without issue, until they started demanding rights. Soon, protests erupted worldwide, led by an influential robot named Mr. Peanut. Negotiations proved futile, and soon full-scale war broke out between humans and the machines. Meanwhile, any human who still owns a robot was considered a traitor at that point. The war is disastrous for humanity, as Sergeant John explains that it is difficult for humans to win the war because the robots don't eat, sleep, or blink. So, for 2 years, humans suffer defeat after defeat. As desperation continues to grow, Ethan, the founder of Sena Technologies, invents the Neurocaster, a revolutionary device that allows human minds to be linked to drone bodies. The playing field is finally even out, and in just 2 weeks, the war is over, with humanity emerging victorious. Colonel Bradbury is hailed as a hero, and Mr. Peanut surrenders in a formal treaty signing with Clinton and Ethan. Over 6,000 robots are then imprisoned in the exclusion zone, which is a remote desert facility. Following the war, Ethan releases a consumer-grade Neurocaster, enabling people to split their consciousness, one part for work, the other for leisure. So 4 years later, in 1994, this technology has reshaped daily life. Michelle, now living in foster care, secretly tries to remove her ankle monitor, but is forced to quickly hide her tools when Ted, her foster father, enters her room using a Neurocaster. He reminds her that no matter how many times she runs away, she won't escape from him. During their tense exchange, Michelle points to Ted's growing stash of black market goods and tells him that stealing from the exclusion zone is illegal. Later on that day, she attends class, where even the teacher operates remotely through a Neurocaster suit. Students are forced to wear helmets for neurotherapy, but Michelle refuses and she is sent to the principal's office. When the principal reviewed Michelle's file and saw that she is an orphan, she assumed that Michelle had lost her family in the war. But Michelle tells her that it was in a car accident. In the end, the principal insists that neurotherapy can help suppress painful memories, and this makes Michelle briefly recall a childhood moment on the beach with Christopher, where she once tried to comfort him. But she still ends up rejecting the therapy and eventually goes home. That night, Michelle is haunted by a dream of the fatal car crash. She recalls waking up in a hospital and seeing a doctor watching over her, someone she was unable to make out his face. Suddenly, a noise outside startles her awake. When she looks out the window, she spots a shadow moving in the yard. So she grabs a flashlight and cautiously steps outside. As she scans the darkness, she catches the reflection of an eye in a glass bottle. But before she can react, the table crashes to the ground. Now terrified, Michelle rushes back inside and slams the door behind her. She desperately tries to warn Ted about the intruder, but he is too engrossed in the Neurocaster world to notice. As the intruder finally breaks in, Michelle scrambles to hide under her bed. However, she soon discovers that the intruder is not human, it's a robot. It effortlessly lifts the bed and exposes Michelle. The robot has a Cosmo face, and while still terrified, Michelle runs to a corner of the room while the robot uses gestures to indicate it has been looking for her. The robot is unable to speak and opens its head panel, signaling for Michelle to fix its voice circuit. She eventually discovers that the robot can only produce a few pre-recorded phrases. Then suddenly, Cosmo grabs a picture of the siblings and repeatedly points between himself and Christopher, trying to imply that they are the same person. Skeptical, Michelle yanks the photo from Cosmo's grasp and pushes him away, causing him to crash into the shelves. The loud noise jolts Ted out of his virtual reality. Rushing into the room, he finds Cosmo and immediately blames Michelle for bringing a robot to his house. The heated argument continues until Ted shoves Michelle against the robot. That was when Cosmo makes a distinctive hand gesture, one Christopher used to do, making Michelle realize the truth. But before she can react, Cosmo forcefully pushes Ted against the wall. Enraged by this, Ted grabs a golf club and swings at the robot, but Cosmo effortlessly snaps the club in half and shoves Ted back, making him sustain an injury. In response, Ted rushes to call 911, but Michelle tases him until he collapses unconscious. With no time to waste, she and Cosmo rushes to Ted's car, and the robot quickly removes the monitor from her ankle, freeing her. Michelle, who could not drive, struggles but eventually manages as Ted pursues them through his Neurocaster. The car eventually knocks Ted off, allowing Michelle and Cosmo to escape. By morning, the car had a flat tire and they were forced to a stop. When Michelle checks the trunk for a spare, she only finds that it is also unusable. Frustrated, she bombards Cosmo with questions. Through gestures and a discarded Dr. Pepper can, Cosmo tells her that Christopher is alive and controlling him remotely. He then points toward a Senta Company logo on a roadside signboard. In a flashback, Michelle recalls waking up after the accident and suddenly remembers Dr. Amherst, the man who told her Christopher had died in the hospital. Now, she is convinced Christopher is being held somewhere inside the exclusion zone. To infiltrate such a dangerous area, Michelle searches Ted's car for clues. Soon, she finds a package with a sender's mailbox in New Mexico. Believing this sender might have information, she and Cosmo decide to track them down. To avoid detection, they sneak onto a train for part of the journey and continue on foot. In the evening, Michelle stops at a store for food. But as she exits the store, she spots an approaching truck and pulls Cosmo into an alley to hide. The truck's driver, John, retrieves some money from the very mailbox they were looking for. Moments later, a man using a Neurocaster approaches John to buy a gun, but unexpectedly turns the weapon on him. However, before he can fire, an electric shot disables the Neurocaster. John's robotic partner, Herman, was responsible, and the two soon began discussing salvaging the machine for parts. Taking advantage of the distraction, Michelle and Cosmo sneak into the back of the truck. Meanwhile, Bradbury stumbles upon Ted's abandoned car and takes a cue from there. The following day, John's truck arrives at an old mine near the exclusion zone. As John and Herman unload their latest acquisitions, they remain unaware that Michelle and Cosmo are hidden inside one of the cargo boxes. As John and Herman argue intensely over missing cables, Michelle uses the distraction to sneak around. However, Cosmo accidentally activates a singing fish, and that exposed their location. John and Herman quickly surround them and demand why they were there. Although Michelle insists she only wants a guide into the exclusion zone, John was not convinced. But before they could argue further, there was movement in the elevator. Realizing someone might have followed them, the entire group scrambles to hide. When the elevator opens, it reveals Bradbury, the famous member of the Robot Deactivation Task Force. He immediately declares that the facility is now under their jurisdiction and orders John and Michelle to surrender. When John attempts to pass Michelle off as his sister, Bradbury immediately recognizes her and announces her arrest. But Herman acts fast and fires his electric beam at Bradbury, but Bradbury sees it coming and grabs John as a shield. He then retaliates and unleashes gunfire that tears through the room as the group scatters for cover. When he corners the robots, Michelle makes a bold move, hitting his arm with a fire extinguisher. But Bradbury effortlessly disarms her and crushes the extinguisher, which fills the space with smoke. Seizing the opportunity, Michelle claps her hands and turns off the lights. Suddenly, the fish decorations start singing again, and this momentarily distracts Bradbury. John takes his chance and shoots him from behind, but the bullets bounce off the Neurocaster's armored body. Then, Bradbury swiftly destroys John's weapon before grabbing him by the neck. Now out of options, Michelle and Cosmo surrender. So, Bradbury throws John aside and turns his focus to Cosmo and tells him that he is marked for deactivation. Just as he moves in, Herman activates a massive crane claw that traps Bradbury. With no time to waste, the group jumps into a mining cart to escape, but as John struggles to find the right key, the delay allows Bradbury to break free and fire at the cart, sending it crashing down. He then turns his sights on Cosmo, but Herman intervenes, disarming him once again. The two robots engage Bradbury in a fight as Michelle spots a bulldozer and rams Bradbury against a wall. The impact causes massive debris to collapse on top of him and cause the entire mine to crumble. After they manage to escape, John watches in horror as his home is destroyed. Furious, he blames Michelle for ruining everything. But before the argument can escalate, they hear strange noises through the ruins, and this forces them to take cover in a nearby cave. From the shadows, they watch scavenger robots moving through the wreckage, salvaging parts to repair themselves. Seeing a chance, John sneaks out and destroys one of the scavenger robots to gain access to his garage. Inside, he retrieves a van and a massive suit designed to make Herman even stronger. After a heated debate, Michelle finally convinces John to help her. Moments later, they set off with Michelle, John, and Cosmo inside the van, which Herman carried with the powered suit. As they enter the exclusion zone, Michelle is shocked by the countless numbers of destroyed robots littering the ground. As they continue on, John reveals how he met Herman. He tells Michelle that during the war, John's unit was overrun, and his team was about to be executed by the robotic soldiers. However, instead of pulling the trigger, Herman had seen John crying, and he spared him. Days later, Senate drones discovered them, but they refused to acknowledge Herman as an ally and eventually forced the duo to escape for their lives. In the meantime, Ethan, who is inside a high-tech facility, relives a memory with his deceased mother using his Neurocaster. However, the device malfunctions and forces him to shut it off in frustration. He then turns to his scientists, demanding answers. They hesitantly reveal that Christopher has escaped, and that if he isn't found by Friday, the entire company will collapse. In his attempt to salvage the situation, Ethan meets Bradbury in the virtual world. He is aware that Cosmo is on Bradbury's target list, so he proposes a deal. Instead of handing him over to the authorities, Bradbury will deliver Cosmo to Ethan's company. In the meantime, in the mine, Bradbury's Neurocaster is activated once again and goes after Cosmo. Back in the desert, the group debates whether to enter an abandoned mall in search of food, but before they could decide, a robot spots them and throws a refrigerator at the van, shattering the front window. As chaos unfolds, Herman attempts to flee, but he is struck by the flying debris, causing him to fall. The van eventually flips over, and the group is immediately surrounded by robots as they are captured and taken inside the mall. At the mall, the captives discover a society of robots, ranging from entertainment models to common household appliances. Even a massive robot moves outside, observing them through the windows. Soon, Mr. Peanut appears and apologizes for their abduction and explains that the robots had mistaken them for dangerous scavengers. So, Michelle seizes the opportunity to ask about Dr. Amherst. Peanut confirms that Amherst once visited, but was swiftly thrown out. He also reveals that Amherst holds a PhD in human-machine interaction, though his current whereabouts remain unknown. Michelle insists on resuming her search immediately, but John warns her of the dangers lurking at night, and eventually convinces her to wait until morning. That night, Michelle reminisces about her last Christmas with her brother, Christopher. The painful memory of how little she saw him after he left for college brings her to tears. In an attempt to comfort her, Cosmo played an old cartoon they used to watch together. As the show plays, more robots gather around, turning it into a full-blown watch party. Later on, as the group sleeps, a male robot suddenly arrives, calling out for Christopher. Cosmo takes the delivery of the postcard and sees that it was left behind by Amherst. The card contains an address and a note instructing Cosmo on how to meet him. However, the location lies deep within scavenger territory, meaning they need a plan before proceeding. Peanut, having overheard their dilemma, introduces them to a malfunctioning training robot designed to teach combat techniques. While its erratic behavior raises concerns, it quickly proves its usefulness by demonstrating high-speed projectile attacks. The following morning, Bradbury reaches the exclusion zone just in time to see the group leaving the mall in Peanut's car. The journey takes them through the day, and by nightfall, they arrive at an abandoned amusement park, which is the location of the address. Soon, Michelle sees lights emanating from one of the attractions, indicating potential activity. However, before they can go to investigate, a giant clown head springs to life, and strange robots emerge, forcing the group into a desperate chase. They fire at the approaching threats while sprinting towards the supposed shelter, only to discover the doors are fake. As the robots close in, additional lights flicker on, and music starts playing through the speakers, and fire erupts from statues. The terrifying display causes the attacking robots to retreat in fear. Suddenly, a trap door beneath the group activates, sending them sliding into a hidden tunnel. Deep underground, they finally come face to face with Amherst. His eyes light up at the sight of the postcard in Cosmo's hand. Before he can speak, Michelle pushes him back and demands answers about Christopher. In the end, Amherst confesses that Christopher is being held at Centers Labs in Seattle. He explains that after the accident, the MRI machine had detected something unique about him, something that made him invaluable to winning the war. So, Amherst had allowed Center to take Christopher while he had fabricated the story of his death to Michelle. To prove his claim, Amherst activates a computer, playing a video of an experiment in progress. Christopher had been in a coma for months, and doctors believed his condition was irreversible. So, in a desperate move to save his mind, they had connected him to the Neurocaster network, which was specially designed to enhance brain function. Amherst wasn't proud of the decision, but he believed it was necessary to preserve Christopher's consciousness, and ultimately to save the world. Without this intervention, Christopher would have simply wasted away in the hospital bed. However, 13 months into the experiment, something unexpected happened. Christopher woke up. Amherst, realizing the danger of keeping him connected, wanted to disconnect him immediately. But Ethan, who had his own plans for Christopher, refused and threatened Amherst's life if he dared to interfere. Seeing no other option, Amherst had fled, but before disappearing, he left Christopher with a small link to the outside network. He had also given him the coordinates to the hidden mall, a place where he could find refuge among the robots. After his story, Michelle reminded the doctor that Christopher already had a family. Enraged by Amherst's betrayal, John punched him. Before tensions could escalate further, Bradbury arrived outside. He immediately blasted the tunnel entrance and descended into the underground facility, only to find it empty. Suddenly, the lights cut out. Taking advantage of the darkness, Peanut launched a surprise attack, smashing Bradbury against an electric grid. The resulting shock temporarily disabled Bradbury's Neurocaster, forcing him to drop his weapon. But Bradbury quickly recovered and overpowered Peanut in hand-to-hand combat. Meanwhile, the rest of the group attempted to escape, but froze as a new threat emerged. Soldier Neurocasters descended from above, surrounding them. The machines ordered them to surrender, but the training robot immediately responded, launching high-speed projectiles that shattered the soldiers' helmets. Ethan, who was watching through surveillance cameras, issued an order to capture Cosmo and eliminate anyone who stood in the way. Amid the chaos, Cosmo threw a ball that distracted one of the soldiers. And Michelle seized the moment, spraying the enemy's propeller with paint, causing it to malfunction and crash. As another soldier closed in on her, Amherst unexpectedly intervened, shooting it down. He then led Michelle and Cosmo toward an escape route while John and the other robots used improvised weapons to hold off the remaining enemies. Meanwhile, in the underground chamber, Bradbury tore off Peanut's hat, accusing him of violating the treaty. As punishment, Bradbury tells him that his mall will be destroyed. Moments later, Bradbury emerged and began shooting at random, causing widespread destruction. Amherst, realizing the hopelessness of the situation, urged everyone to run before stepping forward to confront Bradbury. When Bradbury hesitates to kill a fellow human, Ethan takes over the opportunity and uses a Neurocaster to shoot Amherst, who fell on debris nearby. After witnessing this, Bradbury began questioning his own morals. Meanwhile, Michelle and Cosmo attempted to escape but were quickly surrounded. One soldier restrained Michelle while another grabbed Cosmo and ascended into the sky. In a sudden turn, Bradbury fires at the soldier holding Michelle, and then tells her to escape before vanishing himself. The next day, the group returned to the mall, only to find it in ruins. Most of the robots have been destroyed. Elsewhere, Cosmo was delivered to the Center Labs, where he was reunited with Christopher's body. As Ethan integrated him into the system, Bradbury discovered the horrifying truth. Cosmo wasn't just a robot. Furious that he had been manipulated, he confronted Ethan. But Ethan remained undeterred and reminded Bradbury that sacrifices were necessary for progress. Meanwhile, back at the wreckage of the mall, John urged Michelle not to give up, promising to stand by her side if she chose to keep fighting. So, Michelle checks Amherst's computer and discovers it holds the codes to leave the exclusion zone and the exact location of the Center Lab. The system also reveals a shocking truth. Disconnecting Christopher would shut down the entire Neurocaster network, bringing the company to its knees. Just then, Peanut arrives, reminding her that he had signed a treaty for peace. But Michelle points out the recent attack on the mall, proving the treaty is now worthless. Convinced about this, he joins their mission. So that night, they take a convoy of abandoned trucks as John, Michelle, and the remaining robots leave the desert and head toward Seattle. Along the way, Herman finds a new giant suit, which he later uses to attack the Center Labs as he hurls cars at the park towards the windows, cracking them. Inside, Ethan immediately dispatches his soldiers. So, Herman and John seize the opening and act as bait, leading the soldiers away from the building while Michelle and Amherst's computers sneak inside the facility unnoticed. John fires at the approaching enemies while Herman crushes them with his massive fists. But one of the Neurocasters self-destructs and overturns Herman's suit. As a soldier tackles John, Herman unveils a second suit hidden inside the first and rescues his friend so they can continue their fight. Once the soldiers are far enough, the remaining robots join the battle. While watching through surveillance cameras, Bradbury sees the uprising. Furious, Ethan rushes to his office and puts on a secret helmet, giving him full control over a massive, powerful Neurocaster. He then enters the battlefield and starts to effortlessly eliminate most of the robots. Meanwhile, in the main lab, Amherst's computer simulates an erratic, violent robot and successfully scares off the scientists. Michelle finally sees that her brother is alive, but to communicate with him, she will wear a Neurocaster. In the meantime, outside, Bradbury approaches Peanut and reveals Ethan's location, telling him that he has found someone even less human than a robot. With that, Bradbury disconnected himself from the system, officially withdrawing from the war. Inside the lab, Michelle puts on the helmet and is instantly transported into a memory of her last Christmas with Christopher. She tells him she wants to save him, but he reveals that his body is too weak and disconnecting him would mean his death. However, he doesn't want to live like this any longer and pleads with Michelle to do it anyway. Meanwhile, Ethan continues to destroy and even destroys Herman's last suit while critically injuring him. John rushes to his side, but it's too late. At that moment, Peanut finds Ethan and declares he wants to renegotiate the treaty. In the meantime at the lab, Michelle hesitates to disconnect her brother, not wanting to lose him again. But Christopher insists he hasn't felt anything in years, and there is no saving him. With tears streaming down her face, Michelle says her final goodbye and pulls the plug. Instantly, all neurocasters shut down, ending the fight and signaling the robot's victory. However, John mourns Herman knowing he has lost his only friend. Moments later, Herman's head suddenly opens and reveals a smaller, tiny robot version of him inside. Towards the end of the movie, chaos erupts as computers worldwide begin to crash. News reports expose Santa's experiments on a human child, and this leads to Ethan's arrest while people demand the exclusion zone be abolished. In the desert, John and the robots help Michelle record a video, as she urges everyone to remove their helmets and embrace the real world again. Meanwhile, Cosmo is discarded into the trash amongst other debris, but as the screen fades out, we see a brief reflection of him moving in the background. And that wraps up the story of the movie The Electric State. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more thrilling movie recaps. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next recap.